Hello, friends. It has been a couple absolutely crazy weeks, but I'm finally back to tell you about one of my top favorite fairy tale retelling series. And this might surprise you. This does not have any fantasy magic in it. Before we get to the good part, talking about the books, I want to introduce myself again. I am Chantel. I am the face behind the channel, Fairly Bookish. I'm on all the popular social media channels, primarily TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube right now. I am on Facebook. I have a book discussion group there that is semi active. It is invite only. You can message me if you want in on that, though. I hope you'll stick around, like, subscribe, and just chat books with me. I love making new friends. Now, let's get into the books. So, the series that is in my top 5 series list is the series called The Tales of Winberg. This is by a very talented author, Annette K Larsen. If you have never read any of her books, definitely go give them a read. I discovered Annette K Larsen when I had bought another book on Kindle and it popped up as you may also enjoy this author. So I clicked on it and I was very intrigued about the 3 books that were available at the time and the fact that these were written in a world that was historical more than magical. I love fantasy, I love magic because it allows authors to create such intensely different and unique worlds. The magic is complicated, it's not easy to write, but it does open up endless opportunities of how they can make these stories go, which is why you can read a dozen Beauty and the Beast stories and no two are exactly alike. I love that about magic. However, when somebody takes these stories that we expect to be kind of fantasy magical stories and rewrites them in a world without fantasy magic, that has to be a true talent to get right. And Annette K. Larsen pulls it off perfectly. The first book in Annette K. Larsen's series, The Tales of Winberg, is a Peter Pan retelling. And this is the one that really had me on the fence. I have read a number of Peter Pan retellings. Most of them are fantasy because, well, I mean, Peter Pan could fly and this whole world was supposedly supported by some sort of magic, but I had only read one other non magical attempt at retelling, and it wasn't entirely successful. The story wasn't bad, but it lost all of the elements that we kind of think of when we think of Peter Pan wanting to stay young forever, the evil captain who was trying to take over uh, the world, capture Wendy, all of those types of things. So when I read the book, it was definitely a Peter Pan retelling. Like I knew that that is the story that was being told in this book, but the angle that the author took us on to achieve that was completely different than I expected, and I really, really enjoyed that. The other thing I loved about these books is the characters she writes are so very real. The struggles that they go through are heart wrenching often, but they're also very relatable to the world that we live in. They are set in a world that doesn't exactly exist as our world. Like these are not countries or places that are necessarily familiar to us, but the things that these people go through have elements in them that most of us can relate to. The other thing I really love about this series is just how real and relatable these characters are. These people have fought hard things in their life and they are struggling with very real insecurities or perhaps issues that are hindering them from reaching their goals. There are examples of someone fleeing an unsafe home. There are examples of orphaned children having to find their way in the world when it's a very unsafe place. There is people who are raised in a illegal activity and chose to not follow that path, and how that led them to being abandoned by their parent and how they had to find for themselves a new life. And there was an example of a girl who was following her dreams and her dreams didn't align with what was expected of her, and how she was able to find a way to make those dreams work within the life that she was creating for herself that was safe and healthy and wholesome. There's currently 5 books in this series. I know there's going to be at least one more. I'm hoping that there might be potentially a couple in the wings behind that one. And I don't know if I could pick a favorite. I liked how the first book kind of set up the community and the environment and kind of sets the stage for the key safe haven that the rest of these stories intersect with. But I think each one gets better as it goes. I really liked the Robin Hood one because I have a weakness for Robin Hood stories, and I really thought that that particular story showed love and trust in a way that was very relatable. But it was the last one, the one that was the Sleeping Beauty retelling, that really, really got me. Rose is such a gentle, kind person who was unfortunately put into a situation that separated her from the comforts of her home and really, really gave her every reason to be fearful and anxious and probably very reclusive. And while she did struggle with anxiety, something that I can relate to very much, she retained this ability to be loving and kind and tender-hearted to everybody, even those who were well below her in life status. I especially loved the way that this book addressed trauma. Rosalind has had a lot of trauma in her life, and her mother taught her to tell the story of her pain and as a way to help release it. And I just thought that was so beautiful and so helpful and really something a lot of us will probably relate to. This book had so many unexpected things in it as well. I think it's probably the most suspenseful of the books that I've read so far. There was another one that was extremely suspenseful, but for different reasons. This one kind of takes you on this chase of who done it, and in the end, it just wraps it up so beautifully. I loved the friendship and how it developed and deepened. It wasn't like this instant love connection. They actually worked on it pretty hard, and it was not an easy situation for them just because of how the story was. But I think that it showed that sometimes the things that are worth fighting for are the most important things. And I loved how they fought for each other and how her parents loved and supported her through that choice that she made. I thought that the way that the choice came about was not what I expected, but I really thought it was an excellent way to tell that part of the story. And that book has my heart. So, if you haven't read Annette K Larsen yet, I highly recommend it. I think that it is a series that, if you love fantasy and fairy tales, you will find magical for so many different reasons aside from the fantasy magic. However, here is a tip that I learned belatedly after I finished most of the books in the Winberg tales. That is that you can get some context for the world. And for Princess Marley, I don't know if I'm saying her name right. If you read a previous series, which is called The Books of, I'm going to murder this, I just know it. The Books of Dalthia. Dalthia. It is another 5-book series, and within that series is Princess Marley's story, which sets the stage for the stories in several of the books, especially the last 2. Like I said, I didn't know that, so I read the Tales of Winberg first and then realized that Marley's story is in a previous series. So I am going back and I'm reading those now while I impatiently wait for the next book, which was recently announced was going to be a Hansel and Gretel retelling. And I know the characters in it, and I'm really, really curious how it's going to play out because we've gotten like little hints to something in the last book, especially, and I haven't a single clue how that's going to play, so I'm very curious. So if you have a non-fantasy magical fairy tale or mythology retelling, leave the title in the comments for me. I'm always on the lookout for new books to read that are different from my normal books and would love to check out some of your favorites. I'll see you guys next time.